Welcome to Coketown. The sky here is perpetually choked with soot, the rivers run purple with dye, and the heavy machinery throbs day and night. Ruling over this mechanical world are men like Thomas Gradgrind. A wealthy school board superintendent, Gradgrind operates on one rigid philosophy. Life is a pure calculation, and anything that can't be weighed, measured, or sold is worthless. He enforces this worldview in his own home, raising his children, Tom and Louisa, on a strict diet of logic. He bans imagination, eradicates fantasy, and teaches them to ignore their own emotions entirely. Then Gradgrind takes in Sissy Jupe. She's the daughter of a circus tightrope walker, a girl raised in a world of warmth, physical expression, and vibrant color. Gradgrind adopts her specifically to reform her and scrub the circus out of her mind. But treating a child's mind like a spreadsheet doesn't build a better human. It creates a psychological trap. By starving Tom and Louisa of affection, Gradgrind is quietly suffocating the exact traits they will need to survive adulthood. Step outside the wealthy parlors and onto the factory floor, and the calculations become even colder. Workers here are reduced to mere hands, tied to complex weaving looms for 14 hours a day. These mills belong to Josiah Bounderby, a cruel and boastful manufacturer. Down on the floor is Stephen Blackpool, an exhausted weaver who quietly endures the brutal conditions of the factory. Stephen's personal life offers no escape. He is chained to a miserable marriage with a violent alcoholic wife, who occasionally returns just to sell off his meager possessions. His only comfort is his deep, unspoken love for a fellow worker named Rachel. Desperate, Stephen approaches Bounderby to ask how he can legally end his marriage. Bounderby's answer is brutally simple. The law allows for divorce, but it costs a fortune. Because Stephen is poor, he must remain trapped. Bounderby's wealth, however, makes him highly attractive to Thomas Gradgrind. To secure a prestigious bank apprenticeship for his son Tom, Gradgrind coldly arranges a marriage between the much older factory owner and his teenage daughter Louisa. Years pass, and Gradgrind's logic experiment begins to sour. Working at the bank has turned Tom into a selfish, gambling-addicted clerk. He happily exploits his sister's miserable marriage, constantly begging her for money to cover his debts. Enter James Harthouse, a wealthy and utterly bored aristocrat. Recognizing Louisa's emotional numbness, he strikes up a manipulative friendship with Tom, using the young man's mounting debts to gain access to his sister. At the same time, Stephen Blackpool becomes an outcast. He refuses to join a newly formed workers' union, and when Bounderby orders him to spy on those same workers, Stephen refuses again. Furious, Bounderby fires him. Knowing Stephen is desperate and leaving town to find work, Tom pulls him aside. He instructs the weaver to loiter outside the bank late at night, falsely promising that help might arrive. That exact night, Bounderby's bank is robbed. The prime suspect is instantly the disgruntled, recently fired worker who was seen pacing outside the building, Stephen. Tom needs to hide his own gambling debts, and he weaponizes Stephen's lack of status to do it. By pointing the finger at a poor, marginalized laborer, Tom creates a perfectly believable scapegoat for his own crime. With the town distracted by the robbery, Harthouse makes his move. He corners Louisa while her husband is away, dropping the subtlety and demanding she abandon her miserable life to run away with him. Terrified by the sheer force of a real emotion, Louisa flees. She runs out into a severe rainstorm, completely rejecting Harthouse, and heads directly to her father's house. Soaked, trembling, and utterly broken, Louisa collapses in total despair at Thomas Gradgrind's feet. She looks up at the man who engineered her entire existence and delivers a devastating accusation. She tells him that his strict, emotionless system destroyed her life, stripping away her ability to feel, to love, or to cope with reality. Gradgrind watches his daughter unravel on the floor. His lifelong worldview shatters in an instant. All his facts, figures, and economic models are utterly useless in the face of human vulnerability. His pride wounded, Harthouse quietly abandons town in shame. Meanwhile, out in the countryside, Stephen hears the news that he's a wanted man. He immediately turns around, beginning a long, dark walk back to the city to clear his name. But he never completes the journey. Navigating the dark, treacherous landscape, Stephen accidentally steps off an edge and plummets into the old hell shaft, an abandoned, poorly marked mining pit. A massive frantic rescue operation mobilizes. The town gathers around the windlass and ropes, slowly pulling his crushed body to the surface. Mortally wounded, Stephen uses his final breaths to tell Gradgrind the truth. He explains exactly why he was waiting outside the bank, revealing that Tom is the real thief. The only truly honest man in Coketown isn't defeated by a specific villain. He is literally swallowed and crushed by the physical, industrial wasteland that the wealthy masters left behind. Horrified by his son's guilt, Gradgrind completely abandons his rigid moral principles. Logic dictates that a criminal should face the law, but a father's sudden panic forces him to team up with Louisa and Sissy to smuggle Tom out of the country. To do it, they rely on Sissy's old circus troupe. The very people Gradgrind once despised for their imagination and flair now use those exact skills to disguise Tom, helping him narrowly escape the authorities. The survivors are left to pick up the pieces. Tom dies abroad in regret. Gradgrind dedicates the rest of his days to charity and faith. And Louisa finds her own quiet humanity by helping Sissy raise a loving family. By charting the collapse of this iron-willed family, Charles Dickens leaves us with a stark running. True human survival requires the very emotions, empathy, and imagination that the industrial machine tries so desperately to stamp out.